Hello, my name is Erin O'Connor, and I'll be discussing the kinetics and reaction mechanisms of two specific pollutants that are very prominent in our society. The first pollutant I'll be discussing is called decamethylcyclopentasiloxane, also known as D5, and throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to it as D5. D5 is constantly found in personal care products such as lubricants and aerosol products, and can be identified as having 5 silicones and 5 oxygens that make up this 10-member ring. The second pollutant I'll be discussing are liquid crystal monomers. These are chemicals produced from liquid crystal devices such as smartphones, televisions, or laptops. Both of these pollutants exist primarily in the gas phase, and their kinetics, such as rate constants and atmospheric lifetime, have just started being studied. The presence of these pollutants in our atmosphere and homes is important to research and acknowledge because they have toxic properties that affect air quality and human health. Previous to this research, the kinetics of D5 and liquid crystal monomer reactions with the atmosphere have not been explored. It is important to know and study the rate laws of these pollutants because when researchers understand their reaction mechanisms, their presence is easier to explain in terms of how they affect air quality and the atmosphere. It was found that D5 is oxidized by hydroxyl radicals in the atmosphere, creating a product that is involved with atmospheric partitioning. An example of that is found over here. This atmospheric partitioning breaks these chemicals into fine particle pollution, which poses a great risk to human and animal health, as well as lowered visibility and smog in the air. Liquid crystal monomers are found in and produced by devices that become a foundational tool in modern society. Most liquid crystal monomers were identified as persistent and bioaccumulative chemicals. This means they take longer to break down and are a huge area of concern. Therefore, knowing that the oxidation of D5 and liquid crystal monomers by hydroxyl radicals creates particles that present a risk to our atmosphere and lives, knowing the rate constant of that reaction is crucial to saving our environment. And here in this figure, we can see that this blue line down here represents the lifetime of liquid crystal monomers that was thought to exist, while this red line is the new experimental data that researchers are just discovering now. The goals of past research papers are to come up with the rate of the reaction of hydroxyl radicals with D5 and liquid crystal monomers. In order to start that explanation, the reaction mechanisms were derived. A mass spectrometer was used to identify the products of D5 oxidation. Each of these products, right here, is started by hydrogen abstraction, which eventually forms a peroxy radical. The monomer product, over here, contains various types of functionalization, where methyl groups are replaced by hydroxide or methyl hydroxide groups. This can be shown here where after the reaction took place, a methyl group was replaced by hydroxide. Another product made from D5 oxidation is a dimer product, which was created through dimerization. We learned a little bit about this concept in physical chemistry. These have 2 siloxane rings, and the same functionalization happens here that happened in the monomer product. The last abundant product created are the ring open products. Here, the original D5 ring fragmented and joined to another D5 compound. The fragment also has functionalization, where methyl groups are replaced by hydroxides again. Out of these products, the monomer and dimer products experience atmospheric partitioning and present a great risk to the environment as well as human health. For the mechanism of liquid crystal monomers, I know this looks like a lot, but I'm going to point out a couple key parts. First is the existence of these 3 peroxy radicals. These look a lot like what are present in the oxidation of D5 that I mentioned earlier. The next observation I wanted to mention is that all of these products in the black boxes everywhere represent all the known oxidation products. This is important because since liquid crystal monomers continue to have their products oxidized, it becomes a challenge to understand their toxicity and their presence in our environment. Researchers use an advanced approach to find the rate constants of the reactions. The particle size were measured with a TSI scanning mobility particle sizer and then put into an oxygen flow reactor where the particles were left to react with hydroxyl radicals. After they were reacted, the particles were put into a time-of-flight mass spectrometer where the mass of the particles was found, which led to the confirmation of the oxidation products. Here is a mass spec of the D5 products, which I'll explain more about in my official seminar. And here is the mass spec of the liquid crystal monomer. The rate constant was then determined by the use of molecule marker ions in the time-of-flight mass spectrometer. This finding can lead to further analysis of the results in which rate constant equations were utilized and then further explored to look into atmospheric lifetime of these pollutants. So the constant of rate constants is something we're all familiar with. We began learning it in general chemistry, and then we further explored the topic in physical chemistry and analytical chemistry. Since these pollutants exist primarily in the gas phase, finding their rate constants is a little bit more difficult to do, so the researchers utilized spectrometer devices as well as different scanning technologies that were able to determine particle size and molecule marker ions. However, the concept of atmospheric lifetime is new, but is similar to when we studied half-life in general chemistry and analytical chemistry. Instrumental analysis taught us about how the time-of-flight mass spectrometer was used and to determine the products that formed in this oxidation. Also, organic chemistry taught us about radicals and oxidation mechanisms. However, I did have to educate myself on hydroxyl radical oxidation, as well as the concepts of atmospheric partitioning. And finally, in regards to my seminar presentation, I will start off by explaining the mechanisms and the importance of knowing the products. Next, I will go into the kinetics, starting off with the explanation of the rate constant equations that went into the research and the results that those equations yielded. I'll explain those results and what they mean in regards to the pollutant's existence and their fate in our environment, and then I will talk about further research that can be done to investigate more about these pollutants. And here is my works cited page, where the 2 asterisk references represent my primary sources. Thank you very much.